Everyone said Ravenswood Manor had died with its master, but the moment she crossed the gates, it began to breathe again. The wind screamed through the hollow corridors of Ravenswood as the carriage rolled up the long gravel drive. Thunder groaned across the moors, shaking the black trees that lined the lake. Inside the carriage sat Lady Eveline Harrow, wrapped in mourning silk, her gloved hands trembling slightly, though she would never admit it. 7 years. 7 long, punishing years since her husband's death, and yet the moment the manor came into view, that towering ruin of stone and ivy, her chest tightened as if her heart still remembered the night it stopped belonging to her. When the horses halted, Eveline stepped down, her boots sinking into the wet ground. The air smelled of rain and lilacs, and something faintly metallic, like blood. The servants had sent word that the estate was falling into ruin, doors opening by themselves, mirrors cracking, music playing from empty rooms. But she hadn't come for ghost tales. She had come for closure, or so she told herself. Inside, the house was darker than she remembered. Dust whispered over forgotten portraits, candlelight flickered against long-forgotten faces. Every footstep echoed like a secret she had buried, but never truly forgotten. And then, she froze. From across the great hall, at the top of the grand staircase, stood a man, tall, still, watching her. For a moment, she thought she was seeing her husband's ghost. The posture was the same. The presence identical, cold, unflinching, magnetic. "Who are you?" Her voice broke the silence, soft but steady. The man descended a step. "Forgive me," he said, his voice smooth but low, the kind that could silence an entire ballroom. "I thought the Lady of Ravenswood would never return. I am the Lady of Ravenswood." His eyes, dark as the lake outside, flickered with something unreadable. "So you are." He gave a faint, ironic bow. "Then I suppose the ghosts will sleep uneasily tonight." Before she could answer, thunder roared again, and when she blinked, the man was gone, vanished. Only the faint scent of tobacco and cedarwood remained in the air. That night, as the manor's windows shuddered against the storm, Eveline walked into the east wing, the one she had forbidden herself to enter since the night her husband drowned. The air was colder there. Her candle guttered, and from behind the old music room door came the sound of a piano, a melody she hadn't heard since her wedding night. The door creaked open on its own. Inside, no one. Only the piano keys moving slowly, as if pressed by invisible hands. And beside it, on the velvet bench lay a fresh black glove, a man's glove. Still warm. Eveline's heart stopped, and outside, by the lake, a single lantern burned, held by the same stranger she had seen earlier, watching her from the dark. They said she returned to bury the past, but Ravenswood had been waiting 7 years to bury her instead. They said her husband drowned 7 years ago, but no one ever found the body. The storm had not stopped all night. The windows rattled like restless spirits, and the old manor seemed to sigh with every gust. Eveline sat by the faint light of the fire, still clutching the black glove she'd found near the piano. It was real, not a trick of the wind. Someone had been there. Someone who had touched that instrument she once played with her husband. The same melody they'd danced to on their wedding night. The night he whispered he'd never let her go. Now, she could almost hear that same whisper again, carried by the wind that crawled down the chimney. At dawn, Eveline went to the servants' quarters. Mrs. Cadell, the old housekeeper, nearly dropped her tea tray when she saw her. "Milady, you shouldn't be walking the halls alone. There are things in this house, ghosts." Eveline's tone was sharp, tired. "I've lived with ghosts my entire life, Mrs. Cadell." But the woman's face turned pale. "No, not ghosts. A man. He came here last winter. Said he was inspecting the estate for the crown. Never gave a name. He stays in the east wing, near the lake entrance. No one dares go there after dark." Eveline's breath caught. "The east wing," she repeated softly. "Of course." That evening, she lit a single candle and walked through the long marble corridor that led to the east wing. The walls seemed to close in as she moved deeper into the shadows, her footsteps swallowed by the thick silence. The door to the old library was half open. Inside, the air was colder, damp with the scent of river moss and ink. And then, his voice came again. You shouldn't be here. She turned sharply. He stood by the fireplace, half his face lit by the golden glow, the other hidden in shadow. I might say the same to you, she replied. You're trespassing in my home. His lips curved slightly, not a smile. Something darker. Ravenswood doesn't belong to anyone anymore. It devours whoever tries to claim it. Who are you? She demanded. He didn't answer. Instead, he stepped closer, until the flickering light revealed a long scar that ran across his temple and a gold signet ring on his hand. Her eyes widened. That ring. It was her husband's. Where did you get that? She whispered, her voice shaking. The man's expression hardened. From the lake, he said quietly. The night it tried to drown me. Silence fell heavy between them. She couldn't breathe. He wasn't lying. There was something in his voice, in the weight of his stare that made her skin prickle with recognition and fear. You're saying... She swallowed. You're saying you knew my husband. He tilted his head slightly. Lady Eveline, he said, his tone both tender and cruel. I was your husband. Her candle trembled in her hand, the flame sputtering violently, before the light died, plunging them both into darkness. 7 years ago, he drowned in the lake. Tonight, he returned, wearing another man's face. 7 years ago, he drowned in the lake. Tonight, he stood before her, wearing another man's face. The candle had died, but Eveline could still see him, that unmistakable way he held himself, the quiet precision in his words, the impossible familiarity in his gaze. For years, she had imagined this moment, but not like this. Not in a cold library where ghosts whispered in the rafters and her heart screamed that this was a cruel trick of fate. No, she said finally, her voice trembling but sharp. You are not him. My husband is dead. Are you certain? The man stepped closer, his tone measured, patient, like someone who already knew the answer. The night I fell into that lake, I remember your voice calling my name, before the water silenced everything. Her chest tightened. How dare you? She hissed, stepping back. Do you find pleasure in tormenting a grieving woman? He did not flinch. I find no pleasure in this, Eveline. But lies have lived in this house long enough. The wind outside howled against the glass, and the fire cracked violently, sending sparks into the air. He moved to the light, letting her see him fully. The line of his jaw, the pale scar by his temple, the eyes, those eyes she could never forget. They were Arthur's eyes, but they were colder now, haunted. She whispered, If you are him, then tell me something only my husband would know. He hesitated, his voice low, almost breaking. On the morning of our wedding, you wore blue silk because you were too afraid the white gown would make you look fragile. Her breath hitched. You said you wanted to look strong, for a man who barely knew how to love you. Eveline's knees nearly gave way. Her trembling hand gripped the edge of the desk. Arthur. His name left her lips like a ghost escaping her body. He reached for her, but she stepped back sharply. Don't, she warned. If you were truly Arthur, you would have come back to me. You would have written something. I tried, he said hoarsely. They stopped me. They? The ones who took me that night, he said, his eyes clouding with memories. I was not supposed to survive. They pulled me from the river and gave me a new name, Lord Ashbourne, a mask to wear until the truth was no longer dangerous. She stared at him, unblinking. The truth, about what? About your father, he said quietly. About why I was meant to die. The room fell silent. Even the storm seemed to pause to listen. My father? She whispered. He died years ago. He made me die. Eveline, Arthur said bitterly. He discovered what I knew, that Ravenswood's wealth wasn't earned through trade, but through blood. Illegal shipments. Debts paid with lives. I confronted him, and that same night, I was thrown into the lake. Eveline's hands trembled violently. No, no, that cannot be true. He was a man of honor. He was a man of power, Arthur interrupted, and power never dies cleanly. She turned away, tears brimming in her eyes. I buried you, she whispered. I mourned you for 7 years. He took a step closer, his voice softer now, broken. And I mourned you every single day I was forced to live as someone else. When she finally looked at him again, her face was pale, her voice trembling between disbelief and longing. "What do you want from me?" He didn't hesitate. "The truth," he said. "And you." Her breath caught somewhere between love and terror. The man before her was both the ghost she feared and the man she once adored. She wanted to run. She wanted to stay. The candle on the desk flickered to life again, though neither of them had touched it. Arthur turned to the flame, his voice barely above a whisper. "Some things in Ravenswood never die, Eveline. They only wait. To be seen again." He had returned from the dead, not for vengeance, but for the truth buried beneath her father's name. Some things in Ravenswood never die. They only wait to be seen again. The fire had died down to embers by morning. Lady Eveline stood before the grand window, her reflection pale against the gray dawn. The revelation from last night still echoed in her mind. Her father, a traitor. Her husband, alive but changed beyond recognition. And the house, watching, whispering, as if it knew what was to come. Mrs. Cadell entered quietly with tea. Her hands trembled as she set the tray down. "Milady," she whispered, "the east wing. It shouldn't be opened. Strange things stir there." Eveline turned slowly, her voice low but steady. "Mrs. Burr, I have lived long enough with strange things. It is time I face them." The old woman hesitated. "If you must, then take this." She handed Eveline a small silver key. "It belonged to your father. He kept it close, even in death. I thought it might help." The key was cold, too cold for something that had been kept in a drawer for years. Later that night, while the manor slept beneath the storm, Eveline descended the narrow stairs leading to the East Archives. Every step echoed through the hall, a rhythm of dread and resolve. Her candlelight flickered across the shelves, boxes of ledgers, letters sealed with black wax, maps of the estate. And then, hidden behind a false panel, she found it. A locked chest marked with the Whitmore crest. The silver key slid in smoothly. A soft click. Inside were letters, hundreds of them, bound with faded blue ribbon, smelling faintly of smoke and sea salt. Eveline unfolded the first one. "To Lord Whitmore, payment received. The cargo will be sent under cover of night. No names. No traces." Her heart pounded. Another letter, dated a week before Arthur's death. "The Duke has begun to suspect the shipments. He asks too many questions. You must silence him before he destroys us all." Her hands went cold. She dropped the paper, her knees weak beneath her. Arthur's death was not an accident. It was an execution. The library door creaked open behind her. A shadow moved along, silent, deliberate. "Reading family secrets, my love." She turned sharply. Arthur stood there, his face ghostly pale, a candle in his hand. "How long have you known?" she asked, voice trembling. "Too long," he replied, "and too little." He crossed the floor and knelt beside her, his voice low, urgent. "Those letters, they prove everything. Your father's men drowned me because I discovered the truth. But someone else ordered it. Someone who still walks free." Eveline's eyes widened. "Whoa." Arthur hesitated, his jaw tightening. "The Earl of Wexham." She drew back in shock. "Father's oldest ally? And your betrothed, after my death," Arthur said bitterly. Her face went white. That engagement was forced. "My father I know," he interrupted. "But the Earl never forgot what was promised to him. Your hand, your dowry, and this estate." He picked up one of the letters and held it to the candle. The paper curled, darkened, turned to ash. "No one must find these yet," he said. "Not until I know how deep this goes." Eveline's voice broke. "And if they discover us first?" Arthur looked up at her. The man who had once died for truth, now standing between vengeance and love. "Then we burn Ravenswood to the ground," he said quietly. Together. Outside, thunder rolled like a warning. The candlelight flickered, and for an instant, Eveline thought she saw a reflection in the window. A man, cloaked, watching from the rain-soaked courtyard. The Earl of Wexham. The past had risen from the lake, but the living would not let it rest. Truth hides best beneath silk and song. The Earl of Wexham's grand masquerade was the talk of the county, a night of glitter, gossip, and concealed intentions. It was said he threw it every year to honor his lost friend, the late Duke of Ravenswood. But this year, The invitation arrived at Ravenswood Manor itself. Eveline's hands had trembled as she unfolded the heavy parchment sealed with the Earl's crimson wax. He dared invite her, the widow of the man he helped destroy. Arthur's gaze darkened as he read it beside her. "He's taunting you," he said. "He knows you've begun to uncover the truth." Eveline's eyes flickered toward the candlelight. "Then we shall play his game," she said quietly. "But on my terms." The night of the masquerade, London's elite flooded into Wexham Hall, a palace of gold and deception. The ballroom shimmered under chandeliers, laughter rose and fell like the tide. No one noticed the woman in the silver mask gliding through the crowd, nor the man in black who followed her from the shadows. Eveline's gown caught every flicker of light, a storm of moonlit silk. Her mask hid her face, but not her fury. Every glance, every smile she offered was a weapon wrapped in grace. Arthur stayed close, watching from behind his own mask. A black raven carved in velvet and gold. His presence drew whispers. The mysterious Lord Ashbourne, the stranger the Earl had recently taken into his circle. No one knew he was the ghost of a dead duke come to claim his vengeance. Eveline felt the air shift before she saw him. The Earl of Wexham, tall, cruelly handsome, his mask glinting like a predator's grin. He approached her with a bow too graceful to be sincere. "My lady," he said, his voice low and honeyed, "you honor my hall after so many years." "Your invitation was unexpected," she replied. "I hope to remind you," he said, offering his arm, "that some ghosts deserve to stay buried." She smiled faintly, taking his arm, though her fingers tightened against his sleeve. "Then why, my lord? Do you host a masquerade in their memory?" Wexham's eyes glittered through the mask. "Because, my dear widow, the dead make the best audience." As the orchestra swelled, he led her to the dance floor. The waltz began slow, dangerous, intimate. Eveline moved with precision, her heart pounding beneath the silk. Around them, laughter and wine blurred into music, but every turn brought her closer to the truth. Wexham leaned in. "Your father was a great man," he murmured. "A man who understood that loyalty has a price." "And you?" she asked softly. "What was your price, my lord?" He smiled, that serpent smile. "Your dowry, your silence. Both served me well." Her breath caught. "You killed him," she whispered. He chuckled. "Not killed. Freed." The Duke was too proud, too curious. "I only gave the river what it demanded." Before she could speak, a familiar voice cut through the ballroom. "That river remembers. Wexham. Arthur." Unmasked. The entire room gasped. Gloves froze mid-dance. Fans stilled. The Earl's eyes widened. For the briefest instant, fear cracked through his composure. "You," he stammered. "You're dead." Arthur's gaze was cold, sharp as steel. "So were you the moment you touched my wife." The chaos erupted. Guests whispered, some screamed. The orchestra faltered. Eveline's mask slipped as she turned toward Arthur. His face, the man she had loved, mourned, buried, now alive and burning with purpose. The Earl stepped back, reaching for the dagger hidden beneath his coat. But Arthur was faster. In one swift motion, he caught the Earl's wrist and forced the blade to the floor. "I returned for truth," Arthur said, voice low and trembling with restrained rage. "And tonight, it will be yours that burns." Guards rushed forward, the crowd surged, and the chandeliers swayed above. In the confusion, Eveline seized Arthur's arm. "We must go." He turned to her, breathless. "Not yet. There's one more letter, one more lie to end." Arthur he looked into her eyes, a flicker of pain crossing his face. "Trust me, Eveline. Once this is done, we'll be free." As they fled into the rain-drenched night, the music behind them turned into screams. The Earl's voice echoed across the marble floor. "You can't outrun ghosts. Ravenswood, the house will finish what I began." Eveline didn't look back. The carriage door slammed, wheels thundered against the cobblestone, and in the distance, Ravenswood Manor waited, its windows flickering like eyes opening after a long sleep. The masks had fallen. But in Ravenswood, the truth was far deadlier than any lie. Rain poured like the heavens themselves were weeping for Thornhill Manor. The fire that had devoured the West Wing now hissed beneath the storm's wrath, leaving only smoke, ruin, and the scent of burning oak. Evelyn stood by the shattered window, her gown blackened by soot, her hands trembling, not from fear, but from what she had just done. The revolver still smoked in her hand. Across the room, Lord Blackthorne lay motionless, his white shirt stained with a crimson bloom spreading from his chest. His eyes, once so commanding and cruel, stared lifeless into the ceiling, frozen in shock that she of all people had pulled the trigger. But it wasn't over. The door burst open, and Charles, her husband, stumbled in, soaked to the bone. His face went pale when he saw the lifeless body of the man who had been his master and his rival. "Evelyn," he whispered, stepping forward. "What have you done?" She turned, her tear-streaked face half lit by the dying firelight. "What had to be done," she said, voice shaking. "He was never going to let us go, Charles. Never." For a long moment, the two just stood there, the thunder roaring outside, the manor groaning like a dying beast. Then Charles crossed the room and took her hand, still trembling around the gun. "We must leave," he said. "Now, before anyone finds out." But Evelyn didn't move. Her gaze shifted toward the desk, where Lord Blackthorne's sealed letters lay scattered. One of them bore the royal crest. Another had her name written in his hand. She opened it. The letter was not a threat, nor a confession. It was a will, and it named her as the sole heir to Thornhill Manor. Evelyn froze. "He wanted to leave it all to me?" she murmured, disbelief flooding her. "After everything?" Charles read over her shoulder, his expression turning grim. "He knew," he whispered. "He knew we'd come for him. He wanted this." Evelyn's breath caught. A realization dawned that chilled her more than the rain. This had been his final trap. If she fled, the crime would mark her forever. If she stayed, she'd inherit a cursed estate soaked in scandal. Either way, Lord Blackthorne had won. Suddenly, footsteps echoed in the corridor. The servants. Charles grabbed her arm. "We don't have time, Evelyn." She looked one last time at the body, then back at the flames eating through the rafters. "Then let it all burn," she said coldly. Together, they ran down the hall, through the grand staircase where portraits stared down in silent judgment. Outside, the horses neighed in terror as lightning cracked overhead. They mounted and fled through the gates just as Thornhill Manor erupted once more, the flames bursting out, devouring what remained. Behind them, the fire lit the storm like a funeral pyre. Ahead of them, the moors stretched endlessly into the dark. And as they vanished into the mist, Evelyn whispered, "It's over." But from the ruins of Thornhill, a shadow moved slow, deliberate, alive. A figure stepped through the smoke, clutching his bleeding side. Lord Blackthorne was not dead, and he whispered her name like a curse carried on the rain. "Evelyn." The storm had ended by dawn. The moors were shrouded in a ghostly mist, the kind that swallowed the horizon and blurred the line between the living and the dead. Evelyn and Charles had taken refuge in an abandoned cottage by the cliffs, cold, dripping, and silent. Evelyn sat by the window, her dress still wet and torn, her face pale under the faint light. She hadn't slept. Not after what she'd seen. Not after what she'd done. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw him, Lord Blackthorne's lifeless gaze, his blood spreading like ink across the floorboards. She had shot him. She knew she had. And yet, deep down, she could still feel his presence, like a whisper in the dark. Charles entered quietly, his shirt damp, his jaw set. "The roads are flooded," he said. "We can't leave until the water recedes." Evelyn didn't answer. Her eyes were fixed on the distant horizon. "He's not dead, Charles," she whispered. Charles froze. "Don't start that again. I saw him move," she said, her voice trembling. "When we were riding away, I looked back. I saw him standing in the fire." Charles clenched his fists. "Evelyn, you're tired." Shock does strange things to the mind. But she didn't reply. Instead, she rose and walked to the old mirror by the hearth. Its surface was cracked, clouded by age. But behind her reflection, she could have sworn she saw something move, a dark figure, watching. That night, the wind howled through the cracks in the cottage. The rain returned in bursts, hammering against the roof. Evelyn sat by the dying fire, clutching the revolver. Every creak, every sigh of the wind made her flinch. And then, there it was. A knock. Soft, slow, measured. Charles looked at her, his face drained of color. "No one knows we're here." The knock came again. He took a candle and went to the door. Evelyn wanted to scream for him to stop, but no sound left her throat. The door creaked open, revealing nothing but mist. No one stood outside. He stepped out, peering into the fog. Who's there? No answer. Just the moan of the wind and the crash of distant waves. He turned back and froze. There were muddy footprints leading inside. Evelyn stood up so fast the chair fell behind her. Her pulse pounded in her ears. "Charles," she whispered, "you left the door open when you came in earlier." The candle flickered violently. A cold breeze brushed past them, and then the unmistakable sound of a cane striking the wooden floor. Tap, tap, tap. From the far side of the room a tall shadow emerged through the smoke, coat torn, face burned, one hand gripping his side. His voice was low, hoarse, but unmistakable. "You thought fire would take me, Evelyn." She stumbled back, shaking her head. "No, no, you can't be." Lord Blackthorne stepped into the light. His once handsome face was now marred by half-healed burns, his eyes blazing with cold fury. "You took everything from me," he said slowly. "My home, my name, my blood. But I will take what's mine, even if I must drag you to hell for it." Charles lunged at him, but Blackthorne swung his cane, the hidden blade slicing through the air. Charles gasped and fell, clutching his side. Evelyn screamed, firing the revolver. Once, twice, 3 times. The shots echoed through the cottage. Smoke filled the air. When it cleared, Lord Blackthorne was gone. Only the open door remained, creaking gently in the wind. Evelyn dropped the gun, sobbing. "He's gone. He's finally gone." But as dawn broke over the cliffs, the villagers below saw something that froze their blood, a figure standing at the edge, coat fluttering, staring out to sea. When they climbed up hours later, the place was empty. Only a cane, half burned, lay buried in the mud. And in the wind that howled through Thornhill's ruins that night, some swore they heard a voice, calm, elegant, and cold. "A manor never dies. It only waits for its master's return."